Hello, everyone. So, for this lecture, we are going to be talking about chapter one, which is going to be about a lot about business basics, right? We're going to talk about some key definitions, talk a little bit about history, things like that, and I think it'll be a great experience. So, first off, we're going to talk about how business is constantly changing. So, business world is always changing. If you look at business that existed 50 years ago, they won't look anything like businesses today, right? Compare the same business 50 years ago as today, they're always going to look different, right? Because things change, technology changes, people change, policies change, legal systems change, societal, cultural norms change. All those things are constantly changing, and they're going to impact business. So there are always new trends that are emerging and surfacing that you need to look for. So if you look on Facebook, you'll always see more and more new trends that people and businesses are engaging in, whether it be starting with basic commercials, Instagram pictures, moving on to now TikToks are the big thing at this time. They're constantly trying to change it up to be successful, right? To be successful, companies need to lean into change and embrace it. If you don't lean into that change, you're never going to build your business up. It's always going to be stuck at either where it's at, or it's going to grow a little right now until things do change, and then you're going to become stagnant and you're going to get left in the dust by people who are willing to, you know, adapt to the situation. So an example, if you look at restaurants, right? Restaurants during pre-COVID and then the early, 6 to 12 months of COVID, right? Pre-COVID, businesses, not all of them were on Grubhub, not all of them were on DoorDash, not all of them delivered. But when COVID shut everything down and people couldn't go to restaurants, some restaurants shut down because they didn't make the move to delivery services, or they didn't make a move quickly enough. And then some restaurants thrived, like any of your favorite local restaurant, right? Because they were on DoorDash, they were on Grubhub, things like that. They leaned into that change to say, well, we need to mix things up. We can't do the same thing we've always been doing. We need to mix it up and move forward. So that's kind of the premise of how do you keep a business going forward. So while we all know what a business is, we need to first establish the definition. So that way we all are on the same page. So a business is any organization or activity that provides goods and services in an effort to earn a profit. So right off the bat, you're like, well, what the heck's a profit? You've probably all heard that term before. By definition, it's the financial reward that comes from starting and running a business. So the money of the money a business earns in sales, also known as revenue minus expenses for those of our accounting individuals that are looking at this. Revenue minus expenses. So those expenses are going to be things like your cost of goods sold. Problem is, not every business earns a profit and can oftentimes incur a loss. So lots of small businesses in the community are run by entrepreneurs who are willing to take on that risk, right? So people who risk their time, their money, and other resources to actually start and manage a business. If you start a business, there's no guarantee it's going to be successful. Everything is going to be a challenge. It's always going to be an uphill battle. And those entrepreneurs are tasked with actually creating wealth for themselves. So to do that, they need to adapt and change and keep up with the times. But when they do create the wealth for themselves as an individual, they produce a ripple effect that enriches everyone. Now, right off the bat, you're like, what the heck does that even mean? Well, so not only is person X, so let's say Samantha starts a business and starts making money for herself and her family. At the same time, she's now benefiting lots of other people. She's benefiting the consumer, so the individual purchasing, assuming that Samantha's business produces a product that they enjoy. So the consumer is benefiting. Employees that Samantha hires are also benefiting because now they're getting paid, which is adding to our economy, giving them a higher quality of life. She's paying her dues, her taxes, which benefits society. So as Samantha and her business is making more money, it's creating a positive impact on everyone. So a little bit of history, right? We're going to put it all into context. So businesses haven't all been the same throughout history, right? Hasn't all been sunshine and rainbows, and businesses have changed a lot since back in the olden days, as some people call it. So first off, you had the Industrial Revolution, right? You've probably heard about this in your history class. This is when technology improved lots of businesses and production, improved lots of production techniques, and we're hiring semi-skilled individuals who major production efficiencies led to major production efficiencies, right? So they were creating new machines, new techniques, things like that during this time. The entrepreneurial era, lots of large-scale entrepreneurs emerged to actually build businesses and empires and dominate certain markets, right? And that's why you have today such huge businesses, such titans, right? So if you look at Goldman Sachs, things like that, businesses that are billion-dollar companies, they were able to start off when it was a lot, I don't want to say a lot easier, but there was less individuals trying to get in on the entrepreneurial market, and we're able to capitalize on that and dominate those markets. Then you had the production era of business. So that's when major businesses focused on further refining those production processes and saw the introduction of the assembly line. So the Industrial Revolution, and they were creating those new processes. The production era, that's when you saw some major efficiency improvements, such as the assembly line, which was implemented by Ford, right, when they built the Model T. Then you have the marketing era. So this is when the balance of power shifted from the producer to the consumer. There were lots of different choices for products, which gave us as the consumers lots of different options, right? Your marketing or business marketing had to shift to adapt to this new dynamic of lots of competition. So it introduced new marketing concepts, which was a consumer focus, right? You need to be consumer focused if you want to be number one. If you want to be a successful company, you have to think of, how can my marketing target the consumer? How is my product pro-consumer? And then that brings us to the relationship where companies are not looking at just the immediate reaction, right? Instead, they're looking at developing a long-term relationship with the consumers. So what does that mean? You're not looking to try and capitalize on my dollar today. You're trying to capitalize on my 10 cents today, of which I'm going to come back to you and spend another 10 cents next week, and then another 10 cents, and another 10 cents, until you have $5 rather than just my $1. Now, that may be a poor example, but what I'm trying to say is, you're not looking to try and get my purchase of just today and that's it. You're trying to get me as a customer for life, because as we'll learn throughout this course, it's a lot easier and a lot cheaper to keep me as a customer rather than trying to recruit new customers. So we can't just talk about businesses in the traditional sense. We also need to talk about nonprofits, because they actually have a huge impact on the economy, which, as we're going to learn throughout this course, the economy is a major driving component of the businesses we're a part of. So nonprofits play a critical role in the economy, even if they don't seem to on the surface, right? So if you know what a nonprofit is an organization that essentially they operate somewhat like a business. They try and bring money in, but instead of trying to increase their wealth and give that back to stockholders, or keep it for themselves like a traditional business would be, what they're instead trying to do is they're trying to take that money and reinvest it back into the community, into the people that they serve. They're not trying to make a profit off of individuals. They're business-like establishments, but their primary goal does not include profits. But they're still a business, though, right? As they employ people, they take in revenue, they produce goods and services, and they contribute in significant ways to our region's economic stability and growth. And what I mean by that is, nationwide, nonprofits employ roughly 1 in 10 workers, right? So these are more paid employees than the entire construction industry, right? This is a ton of people. Why is that important? Because think of 1 in 10 individuals are employed by this sector of business, as we could call it. If that sector of business went away, imagine how much money businesses would be losing. It would be astronomical. So another basic thing we need to learn about is something called factors of production, and how they're the basic building blocks for business. So both businesses and nonprofits rely on factors of production, and there's 4 fundamental resources to achieve their objectives, right? So there's natural resources, capital, human resources, and entrepreneurship. So natural resources, these are factors that include inputs such as land, water, wind, mineral deposits, etc. Capital are factors including machines, tools, buildings, information, and technology. If you're an accounting major, this is something you'll learn about, is capital in the business. It's not just money, it's things like your equipment as well. Human resources. So you're probably like, what is that, like an HR department? Nope, your human resources are your factors that encompass the physical, intellectual, and creative contributions of everyone who works within an entity or an economy. So these are the actual people. These are the humans that are at your, I don't want to say disposal, but essentially at your disposal, right? These are people that you're able to say, Jim, go out there and do this. Sandra, go out there and do that. They're your human resources. They're a resource of humans. And then entrepreneurship. These are people, like we said, who are willing to take on risks of launching and operating their own business. And they largely are a response to their primary goal is profit, right? That's their main thing. So what is the most important factor? So you can look at lots of different things, right? There is no one specific most important factor. They're all very important. It's going to be subjective as to what you think is most important. So the business environment. So no business operates in a vacuum, right? They're all kind of bouncing off of each other. Every time Apple brings out a new product, right, that's affecting Microsoft, Samsung. It's affecting Walmart, right? It's affecting Best Buy. Lots of different individuals are being impacted. It's impacting your small businesses. The introduction of the iPad was huge in terms of people able to actually sell products at a stand without needing a POS system, right? They were able to just use their iPad to pay for things. So in businesses, there's things called external factors that play a crucial role into determining if a business succeeds or fails. And what that means is that there are lots of factors that are impacting if a business succeeds or fails that are outside of the business itself. So that broader business environment can make the difference if the overall economy thrives or disintegrates. So if the economy is doing great, well, then things are going to be great for businesses. If the economy is doing not so great, well, then it's going to be a hard time, right? And there are 5 key dimensions of businesses that we need to talk about. There is the economic environment. And remember, these are all external of the business, nothing internal yet. Economic environment, competitive environment, technological environment, social environment, and then the global environment. So first is the economic environment, right? So let's take a step back, right? So at this point, everyone in this watching this video, at this time anyway, has probably lived through the year 2008. I would be pretty impressed if no one has lived through the year 2008, right? So in 2008, the U.S. economy plunged drastically. It was really down in the dumps, right? Things were really bad. You could probably ask your parents about it and talk to them about how terrible it was. Some of you may have been even adults who have lived through this, and that was a pretty bad time. It was the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression, right? It's called the Great Recession. It was terrible. So what happened is large financial institutions collapsed, creating large numbers of bailouts by federal governments and the Federal Reserve. The stock market lost more than a third of its value. 11 million workers were just out of work, just like that. Right? It was a pretty rough time. As a result, the U.S. had to take action, and at that time, President Barack Obama passed a bill which allowed to rebuild infrastructure, allowed for different bailouts of businesses to try and keep lots of individuals employed at that time. And because of that bill that was passed by former President Barack Obama, it ultimately led to the longest economic expansion ever recorded, which was ended by the COVID-19 impact back in early 2020. So the question is, how and when will the economy recover, and what scars will remain? Well, we're starting to see that now, and it's actually really up in the air right now. There's a lot of social changes that kind of came out as part of everyone not working for a very extended period of time, which, that's not what we're going to talk about now. That's something we could talk about later. For now, we need to kind of take a step back to our topic, which is about how the economic environment is impacting the business. So the government takes active steps to reduce the risks of starting and running a business. The government doesn't want you to fail. The government wants you to succeed. Why? Because the more business you bring in, the more taxes they're going to get from you, right? And the more improved our economy is going to be. So they want you to succeed. And as a result, they're going to push different policies and legislative bills that help with that risk of taking on a new business because they want to see you thrive. So the result of those policies and changes that they're going to make for that goal results in a free and fair competitions flourishing in all different industries. They want to make it as fair as possible, right? So research shows that even though the economy has hit a tough spot right now because of COVID, this won't deter many businesses from starting. And they're actually saying that entrepreneurs are still planning to launch firms within the next 3 years, right? Even though the economy is still in this weird influx of what's going on. So government policy to support business is relatively low federal tax rates for individuals and businesses. They want lower tax rates so that way they incentivize people to actually start businesses. Some states make local economies even more appealing by providing special tax deals to attract new firms. That'll be your state tax, right? Not your federal, but the federal government, they control your federal tax. State and local control your state and local. And they can make special policies to try and incentivize businesses to start there, right? To try and attract individuals to build up their economy. So the government runs special organizations such as the Small Business Administration to help support small businesses. I'm going to take a sip. So in terms of legislation, that's another factor that we kind of touched upon that you need to consider for when you're starting a business, as laws are going to create drastic changes for many businesses, right? There's lots of laws that make things legal, make things illegal, right? When we're talking about, let's say, medicinal or recreational marijuana use, right? In Pennsylvania at this time, you can't use marijuana for recreational use. It's only for medical use. But individuals are still looking at state legislation to try and see and identify, okay, is it going to become legal, right? How many governors and mayors and things like that are backing up the idea that we should have recreational marijuana use, right? So if they're paying attention to that and they're saying, they could make the guess, you know what, they're going to legalize it at this next meeting, right? They're going to vote on it at this time. It'll be legal. So if you pay attention to that, you could potentially come out on top by saying, I'm going to capitalize on this and actually start my business, right? And that's why paying attention to legislation is so important for businesses, because they could create a policy that legalizes something tomorrow, and then the next day they can make something else totally illegal, right? Let's look at Skittles. They have an ingredient in Skittles that they've identified is super poisonous, right? So they might say tomorrow, you know what, we're going to outlaw that chemical in all foods. And then Skittles is going to have to say, okay, what do we have to do? How do we change up our formula now so that way we could still stay in business and make Skittles for people, right? Another thing you need to consider is corruption. So unfortunately, there's always going to be corruption. It would be great if there was no corruption, but unfortunately there is corruption. And that's something we need to consider, because if you have low levels of corruption or bribery, it dramatically reduces the risks of running a business. So why is that? The reason is because no one with more wealth or deeper pockets is going to be able to put out your business just by paying somebody off if there's low levels of corruption. So that's an ideal environment for us. So up next is the competitive environment. So the goal is to develop long-term mutual benefits with the customers, right? A long-term mutual relationship with the customer. Getting current customers, as I said before, to spend more money at your business is much less expensive than trying to convince potential new customers to try your product for the first time. If you transform your current customers into loyal advocates, then you know what? You're getting free promotion, right? If you could convince the people that buy your product now to go out there and tell all their friends to try out your product, well, then you're more likely to get those people on, right? People will trust their friends more than they'll trust an advertisement. And word of mouth is free. So if you ever start a business, try and make loyal advocates. That's the best thing you could do for your business in terms of marketing. Another thing is customer satisfaction comes from delivering value. You need to deliver value. And the best measure of value is the gap between product benefits and the price. So the product needs to benefit the customer equal to or more than the price of the competitor, right? So let's take the iPhone, let's just say the base iPhone 13, and let's compare that to the latest Android phone. Let's go with the Google Pixel 5. All right, so right now, let's say that they're both priced at $1,000 each phone. Very similar battery life, similar storage, things like that. The customer will go with whatever one they have preference for, right? So maybe they prefer Apple software, iOS versus Android, or vice versa. Now, let's say that Apple decides to, in the next iteration of their iPhone, or they decide to change up the price of the iPhone 13 to $5,000. Well, who's going to buy that? That's a lot of money, but to a lot of people, are they going to see that gap between price and benefit, right? So $5,000 for someone who does everything off of their iPhone, while it's kind of ridiculous, that price tag, they may say it's worth it to me because of the value it brings me. So up next, we're talking about the competitive environment, and we're going to talk about leading edge versus bleeding edge. So you've probably heard of those terms before, or at the very least, bleeding edge. Leading edge, you've probably heard in passing. So let's start with what's called speed to market. So that's the rate at which a firm transforms concepts into an actual product. So the pace of change in the business world is just getting faster and faster. There have been more technological advancements in the last 20 years than they were in the previous 100 years, right? It's been pretty crazy how much we've seen improvements. So that leads us to the difference between leading edge and bleeding edge. So bleeding edge firms launch products that fail because they're too far ahead of the market. So I don't know if you know, but a few years ago, and by a few years, I'm talking probably like between 8 and maybe 10 years ago, Google came out with something called Google Glass. And essentially they were smart glasses that had a little screen on them that would allow you to do several different tasks. Very basic. It was a bleeding edge product. No one even thought of creating that product. And what happened? It failed. It was a disaster. They were extremely overpriced, especially for that time. And the world just wasn't ready for them, right? The world wasn't ready for them. So that was a bleeding edge product. Now let's look at leading edge. Leading edge firms offer products just as the market becomes ready to embrace them. So Apple is a big leading edge firm. They used to be bleeding edge, and now they're more refined to do leading edge. They're ready. They know when the market's going to be ready. They've prepared the market to be ready, right? So what's an example of this? Well, right now there's actually rumors of the Apple Glass coming out, and the market seems to be ready for a product like that. But it took years for people to get used to that idea, right? And that's where leaks and rumors in the tech world and things like that come out, getting people ready, getting people excited. So Apple, that Apple that you know and love, is leading edge. Up next, we'll talk about the workforce advantage. So employees can actually contribute further to the firm's competitive advantage if you utilize them properly. Studies show that investing in worker satisfaction, so your employee satisfaction, yields actual tangible results, meaning that they're going to yield results for your business. So increasing company worker rating by just 1 star out of 5 stars found an almost 8% jump in your market value. So making your employees happier is something super crucial, because it just right then, if you go up by 1 star, your business is very likely to jump 8% in the market value, which is huge, especially for big monstrous businesses, but it's also pretty big for small businesses as well. Not only employee satisfaction is something you need to consider, but also excellent product management can also play an important role when it comes to your business. So up next is the technological environment. So business technology are any tools that businesses can use to become more efficient and effective. So business tech companies are more frequently developing products for these companies in things like computers, telecommunication, which is your phones, and digital tools like a POS system. As a result of new technologies, new and massive industries were able to grow and thrive in these newly created markets, right? New industries emerged and some disappeared. So the email industry or the email service kind of put out faxing, right? Nobody really faxed anymore once they could start emailing things. When was the last time you heard someone mail a fax or send a fax? I don't even know how to send a fax, to be honest. Someone at my previous work asked me if I could send a fax to them, and I was like, I don't know how to do that. I'll send you a scanned email document. But the faxing industry is kind of out now, right? Nobody really faxes. And the biggest contributor for change in the business world is the internet, right? So it led to the rise of e-commerce, otherwise known as online sales. Everybody watching this has probably ordered something from Amazon at least once before, and allowed businesses to tap into the worldwide market, right? So that's huge for businesses because most of the world's business is actually outside of the United States. The US only has about 5% of the world's population, which means that there's 95% of the world we need to tap into, and the internet has allowed that. The social environment, another thing, external thing that's impacting businesses, which it embodies the values, the attitudes, customs, and beliefs shared by groups of people. Oops, just plop a little S there. So shared by groups of people. So these are what your cultural norms are, as I like to call them. This also covers your demographics, which are the measurable characteristics of a population, right? So it could include your age, your gender, your race, your education, your income level, lots of different things. If you could categorize it, it is part of this, right? So there's lots of different things impacting the social environment. Now, when we talk about diversity means having a workforce comprised of all different people, right? And it's important because it allows you to see situations through a different lens than how you view them. So let's go with age, right? If you have a workforce that is comprised of only people who are age 60 and above, they're not going to view things the same way that people in their 20s, 20 to 30 range, or 10 to 20 range are going to view it, right? They're going to view X in totally different things. That company may say X, Generation Z may say, oh, you know what? I don't view it like that, right? Same thing with if it was roles were reversed. A company that's comprised of people who are all aged 20 to 25 are not going to view topics the same way that people aged 60 to 70 are going to view them. So it's important to have diversity. It's important to have people of different ages, different races, different genders, different education levels and income levels to get that perspective. Because it shows improvements in productivity, and it shows improvements of outcomes, and it shows improvements of the company's bottom line. Last thing we're going to talk about is the global environment. So the U.S. economy operates within the context of a global environment, meaning that the U.S. economy is great, that we're a part of it, but our economy is impacted by China's economy. Our economy impacts Japan's economy, which impacts Germany's economy, which impacts Australia's economy, right? Which impacts Italy's economy. All of these things are part of this kind of living, breathing network. If the US economy were to crash tomorrow, worse than it's ever crashed before, it's going to negatively impact China, Japan, Germany, Italy, and vice versa. If China's market collapsed tomorrow, that's going to impact the US economy in some way, shape, or form. Same thing with Japan, Germany, Italy. And I'm only naming those because those are the ones at the top of my head right now. So all this is to say is that they all interact with each other on some level, right? So there's changing in business due to blurring of the lines between these economies, right? So 100 years ago, back when we didn't even have a way to call or communicate with these different countries, it was a lot different, right? It was you're selling in the US or you're selling in China. Now, because we have online and e-commerce sites, it's kind of this blurring of, what economy are you benefiting by purchasing this product, right? If you're purchasing something on Amazon, you don't know, is this from the United States? Is it from China? It could be anywhere because it's an online retail site. So it kind of blurs those lines between these individual economies by creating this overlap. And finally is that it can be impacted by global events such as war. So right now, unfortunately at this time, the war between Russia and Ukraine is still going on. And you could see how it's impacting lots of things. So you're coming off the COVID-19 pandemic. Now you're entering this war, or now we're hopefully mid or towards the end of this war between Russia and Ukraine. Both of those things impacting each other have impacted food chains, supply chains. And you're starting to see inflation start growing out of control. And it's not very good. So these global events are really negatively impacting business. All right, so that was chapter 1. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, and I'm happy to address them. Thank you. Bye-bye.